as well. Please stay and proceed to the table on the stage, please. May I also invite Professor Wang, Professor Law, Professor Ken, Professor Longting, and Professor Claude to join the question and answer session, please.
Well, I think you have heard all the good comments and the nice advice from our panel chairs or their representatives. This is the time for you to tell us, do you have any questions, advice, concerns, comments? And this will be the time to reflect to us, and we would try to answer as much as possible any of your comments. So, any comments from the audience? Yes, Nancy.
There's an inverse relationship between success rate and the amount of funding per application. So the highest the success rate, that would drive down the amount of funding you will allocate for the application. So I'd like to know for each panel, how do you reach that decision? Because I understand that some panel you have, you fund a larger number of grant applications and the amount per grant is lower, but other panels you have a lower success rate, but the amount of funding per application is higher. So I think it would be interesting to know how each panel sort of reached that decision.
So maybe let me first take a crack at this, and before I pass it on to the panel members. I think that in a way that when we look at the reviews, it is more based on criterion reference, meaning that you look at some absolute score, some standard in terms of fundable, not fundable, and in general the standard has been increased. That is like we take just take an example. Suppose that that 4.5 is considered as excellent proposal, and you have enough proposals to fund all the 4.5 category, then you fund it up to that amount. In different panels, there may be different distribution of the scores. Some panels may have a higher percentage of proposals meeting that criteria, whereas in other panels, there may be less. So in a way that each panel try to fund as many as possible of the fundable proposals up to certain criteria. Now, of course, money is limited, that you cannot try to fund everybody. So you have to cut off at some point. In the phase 1 review of the RGC, we actually asked a question to all the members in the community, whether we want to reduce the success rate and give more money to each individual proposal or each grant. And the unanimous answer coming back is that they don't want to reduce the success rate. They want to keep the success rate to be the same and keep funding at what we are doing. So at this point, I think we are at some steady state. The average success rate is around 33–35%. Comparing to other jurisdictions, it is considered high. For example, like in mainland, the average success rate is about, for NSFC proposal, is around 25%. In the US NSF, it could be like 10%. We are up to 35%. It is considered very good. Of course, the amount of money is small. It's very modest. The average grant size today is around 600,000 Hong Kong dollars for 2 years. And for larger ones, maybe it goes up to 3 years. So there is something changing in the horizon, because we are getting new injection into the Research Endowment Fund. In the RGC Council meeting on Saturday, we will be discussing how to rationalize and use the money. But I think the initial thinking at this point is that we would not increase the success rate any further. We would keep the success rate to be something like 33–35%. But to increase the grant size further. And we anticipate the grant size to be increased to something like, on the average, maybe, let's take a number, say $750,000 to $800,000 as an example. So we plan to increase the grant size using the new money. As well, there may be other plans for using the money, but one of the priority is to increase the grant size of the GRF and the ECS proposals, which are the bread and butter of all the individual investigators that we have today. Another proposal we are considering is to increase the size for collaborative research grants. And there is a panel looking at how to rationalize the use of the money for collaborative research proposals. This includes the CRF, the TRS, and the AOE proposals. So we will look at, because right now those proposals are all funded in silos, meaning that you give a pot of money, say for CRF is $110 million, TRS is $200 million. We want to look at maybe to see how we can put all this money together rather than dividing them into parts and funding them by individual parts, and try to see how we can rationalize so that there may be some dynamic mechanism in funding different collaborative proposals of different magnitudes in any given year. So these are all things that are in the horizon that we are planning now. And of course, all this comes because of the $20 billion injection into the Research Endowment Fund. And hopefully that we would have the interest by next June. This year, we are already, initially we were thinking of reducing the money, but because of the injection, we are no longer reducing the funding. We have the same size. We would consider even increasing the size of the funding for slightly using or tapping into the reserve this year. Even though before we get the injection into the Research Endowment Fund, we would be using some money in the principal and in the reserve in order to have larger grants for funding this year. So that's the a status report on what we are doing in the coming year and in the future.
Yeah. Okay, thank you much for the sharing. It's very informative and helpful. So may I have a question for Professor Clark? Yeah. Could you give more details? Yeah, I'm here.
Who is speaking?
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. Yeah, could you give more details about how many GRF proposals and ECS, and how many of them are funded, such kind of information? Yeah, thank you.
I can only really speak for the sub-panel of the Humanities and Social Sciences panel that I chaired. That's the Humanities and Arts sub-panel, where we considered 280 proposals this year, 280. And we continued what I think is a proud tradition of being very generous to ECS proposals. Am I allowed to disclose a percentage of success?
I think the numbers here are not that important. That is like you can say some numbers that. Yeah.
I don't want to get into trouble.
We still have to approve the funding recommendation on Saturday, so everything yes, here that we discuss is tentative.
But
I was told not to disclose, so just.
So I shall be careful with my words, yeah. But you have a high chance of being successful with ECS. A pretty even chance of success with ECS. That's not a number. Yeah. Less so for the GRFs. But we don't, at least in our sub-panel, head towards a percentage of success or not. It's as it falls each year. It tends to be roughly in the same ballpark each year, although, as others have observed, the quality of applications over the years is improving every year. But we just end up with the percentage of success, for example, with the GRF, without aiming in any particular, towards any particular percentage.
Okay, we have a question here. Yeah.
Patrick Lau from Hong Kong BU. I have a question about the the panel categorization because I'm an exercise science researcher. And then whenever our colleagues would like to submit the proposals in exercise and health intervention studies, then it doesn't fall into physical education. So we cannot put it under education. And we don't really talk about the medicine. So we don't fall in the medicine panel. So this is difficulty in last 16 years when I'm serving here. Of course, I actually put under the humanity and social science and public health. So because my intervention studies is related to public health and PA, physical activity. But there has been a problem for our colleagues in this area in Hong Kong because to a certain extent, exercise and sports science is not a mainstream subject in university. So is there any possibility to create a subcategory for us so to a certain extent we can locate much more appropriate external reviewer for us? Thank you.
So, humanities and, health and
in humanities and social sciences, we do get a wide range of applications, often which seem to be rather scientific. I mean, eye tracking, for example, is not something that most humanities scholars are familiar with, but we make an honest and I think fair effort to judge these things, guided by external reviewers, but also making our own judgment as to the quality of the application, quality of the proposal in relation to the other proposals that we are assessing in the particular round. But yes, it would be difficult to create panels for every conceivable subject area. Sometimes jurisdictions have sort of cross-disciplinary panels or something like that that might accommodate things that don't fit neatly into existing panels.
I think let me also mention that in terms of creating panels, it depends on the number of proposals submitted in a particular area. If there are a large number of proposals submitted in the area, then most likely there will be a panel and there will be readers in that area. But if there are not enough proposals in a particular area, usually the panels would direct the proposals to an appropriate reader. You may have submitted that to the biology and medicine panel incorrectly, but that would be channeled to a different panel, maybe to the humanities panel, and identified an appropriate reader to process your proposal. Now, when we try to identify reviewers, we try to identify experts in the area to handle the proposal. However, the readers handling the proposals may not be exactly in your area. So you cannot expect that there will be a reader in every possible area on people doing research in Hong Kong. As mentioned earlier, that the readers may be generalists, that they would be able to understand your proposal, but they are not experts in the area. They would rely on reviewers to identify the strengths and the weaknesses of the proposals. All right, we have a question here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I just want to clarify a little bit about the point made by Professor Longtin. I'm not from your panel, I'm from the social science, but you mentioned about people asking for a big amount of money beyond the confines, and the amount you mentioned didn't seem to be the confined according to my understanding. So I want to understand basically what is the range here, because it's written very clearly what is the minimum, and the ceiling maybe is a little bit hidden and not so bluntly stated in the I don't know who can answer. I'm not in your area, but I'm in the social science, and I don't want to again bother Professor Clark, even though I like your accent very much. So that's another matter.
At least for business panel, it's 2 million.
Yeah.
So just to be more blunt in terms of the ceiling, because what you mentioned is still below the ceiling of the social science and the humanities.
So first I must say that I have never been through the process of applying for a grant, so I don't actually know the information made available to the researchers. I do believe that prior average awards are made, if that is correct.
I think that we have set some caps because in the past we have issues with individual panels. I think the panel chairs, there may be some general upper bound in the money that you can apply for a GRF and the ECS, say $2 million. But normally within each panel, they would try to identify a suitable cap. For example, like we normally know that biology and medicine panel have the higher cap than humanities and social sciences. But the cap would be something nominal that would be used in the panel as a guide. Individual proposals may vary in terms of the funding depending on the need of the proposal. So they would have to decide, like it is not always universal that you only get one student or one research assistant by default. It all depends on the work proposed and the quality of the review and the quality of the reports that we got.
Thank you. I still would like, in that case, to request that there will be some consistency between the information that we get and the decision of your ceiling. This is my request for future.
The request, I think we have set some cap in terms of, yeah.
Yes, so as long as we are within this cap,
yeah, we have a cap for each proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Martin Chung from Hong Kong BU. I have a question about I think some of you mentioned about the declaration of previous work, which is very important. And my question is related to that. What if I want to propose a new project, which is a continuation or a new development of an existing GRF grant that I'm having? What are some of the pitfalls or precautions that we should take into account when we do that? Thank you.
Maybe I can offer some thoughts first. The kiss of death in the proposal business worldwide is the word incremental. Incremental. And when you suggest a continuation of existing work done, you start to fall into that category. Now, keeping in mind that you are competing with otherwise some very innovative ideas. So by the very fact of attaching yourself to work that's already been done, in my opinion, you put yourself at a disadvantage. Does that automatically mean that you're going to be disqualified? No, certainly not. But again, you're already on a weak footing. Now that said, again, the more serious concern, and this actually came up in our panel, is the question came that the work being proposed was actually very similar to work that was already being funded. And that's a much graver situation. And that really was the essence of my comment, to make sure that if you do have something, and it happens, right? We all are experts in certain areas, and we tend to propagate along those directions, absolutely. But you just want to be very clear that what you're doing now is distinct and unique from what you've done in the past, and the more distinct, the more unique or groundbreaking, you definitely want to make that clear, just for the sake of the reviewers. In fact, in the end, it turned out that it wasn't necessarily an issue, but the very fact that this came up already put this proposal at a disadvantage, in a negative light.
Any other comments? No, I also want to add to the part about declarations. I think we have seen cases of that before that got into trouble because of the lack of declarations. In some proposals, a very small percentage of the proposals we have seen is that the PIs purposely withheld results that were already done when they wrote the proposal, meaning that the research was already done, they have the results, and they submitted the proposal pretending the research is new. And just before the announcement of the results in June, then they send the paper out for publication to catch the train and make sure that the result would got out. This got them into trouble because the reviewers actually found out that those results were already done. And in a way that it is the PI was not honest and in disclosing the research that was already done, and that got them into trouble in disqualification and also barring from submitting proposals for some number of years. So this is something very important, meaning that if you have done the research, be sure to declare the research in your proposal. Do not try to withhold them. Even though you may have done the research after you have submitted the proposal, but there is still a time by April when you can update the declaration. Be sure that you do that update at that point. Don't withhold the results and not declaring the research that you have already done.
Yes. Since the reviewers' comments very important for the proposal to be success. So my question will be on the reviewing process. The first question is that actually whether have a minimum number of reviewers for each project. For example, 2 or 3, okay? And how those scoring to be finalized? Is it take an average among those reviewers, or those extreme cases will be taken out? So my third question is that whether the putting or nominating the reviewers will be an advantage for the applicants. Thank you.
I can answer the first 2 questions. At least in the business panel, we require a minimum of 2 external reviewers. So this is something that we often get more than 2. As to aggregating those reviews, we are not following our outliers. The first reader and the second reader, as well as the panel, will read each one individually and judge the totality of the assessments. Sometimes the outlier actually is the most informative one, and we will actually put more weight on it. And sometimes the outlier is actually totally uninformed, or is not an expert in this area, or just someone out for lunch that he's just why I don't like this proposal. And obviously that will be discounted. So that's not a scientific formula that we use. At the end of the day, the judgment is going to be made by the first reader, the second reader, as well as the panel. The external reviews are only used as references. So sometimes we will pay a lot of attention. Sometimes if we come to our judgment that this assessment is very biased or very uninformed, we will ignore it. So there's no general guideline that how we aggregate those scores. At the same time, we also have a system to penalize the poor reviewers. If we actually see a reviewer that is not doing his job or just writing 1 or 2 sentences, not giving any informed assessment, then we will blacklist we will give evaluations of the external reviewer and say, do you want to use this reviewer again? We will say no. Once that reviewer has got a few bad reviews, then we will never use those reviewers. So there's a system there in place that will make sure that bad reviewers will not continue to review proposals for RGC.
Regarding the third question, whether you can nominate reviewers, we have already done away with that possibility. You can no longer nominate reviewers in your proposals. This always often gets people into trouble because they nominate close collaborators that have relationship to the proposal, and which the person is not supposed to do. So this got some people into trouble. So since I think last year we have done away with that possibility. Yes.
In some countries like Australia, I think Professor Mai knows very much. The applicant has a chance to send a 1-page rebuttal before the panel sit. So I know there will be considerable additional work. So do you think it's doable?
And the same is true in New Zealand. Not much is true between Australia and New Zealand, but in this case, the Royal Society of New Zealand's Marsden Fund does have a system like this, but it's specifically for a very high-level award, like a Guggenheim type of award, and so it is expensive to do that. and cumbersome. And so I think what I've seen over the years at the RGC level, GRFs and ECSs, that would be a very cumbersome mechanism that would slow the process down a great deal.
I would just add to that. I mean, when you're dealing with 400 or 500 proposals, and then you've got these 400 or 500 additional one-page summaries, it really would become quite laborious.
I mean, just to clarify, in the Marsden Fund Awards in humanities, for example, no, across the board, I think 20% go from a first round one-page application to a 5-page full application, and ultimately about 8% of people are successful. It's that 20% who are allowed to rebut reviewers, not everybody who's applied.
Actually, we have tried this experiment this year on the theme-based research and the AOE. So it is something new that we tried this year. We asked for one page, we gave the comments back to the PIs, and then we asked for one-page rebuttal within 1 week. The responses we got from the PIs were mixed. They were not universally happy with the response. For one reason, some people will say that 1 page is too short. They want more pages. Now, the other people will say more pages would not be good because they have only 1 week. So we cannot find strike a balance that meets the needs of everybody. And so, but in any case, I think we are continuing on with, as Paul was saying, we are going to continue with the major awards with the theme-based and the AOE. We would have to see whether to go with the CRF or not, but CRF is still a large number. They're on the order of 200 proposals. But when we go to theme-based or the AOE, we are only looking at 20, 30 proposals at maximum. So we can handle the 20 or 30 pages additionally. So this is something that we try. But I think that, as mentioned, going to the GRF and the ECS would be quite prohibitive, because there would be, we are talking about 3,500 proposals that got submitted, and we cannot distinguish who to submit or not submit a response. Handling that 3,500 pages of responses would be quite phenomenal, even by the panel members and the reviewers.
Can I resign before you introduce that?
Hello.
Yeah. Okay. Here.
I'm Hong Kong from Hong Kong BU. May I ask, for the resubmit proposal, will it be sent to the same reviewer? Thank you.
For the business panel, we try to do that. We try to either send it back to the first reviewer or to the the first reader or the second reader, because those readers are most familiar with the resubmission. So that's our normal practice. And I personally don't see anything wrong with doing that.
They are sent to possibly the same readers, but there is no guarantee that they will be sent to the same reviewers.
Exactly.
Questions?
Hi, John
Here,
from HKBU. 2 questions for Professor Wah and 1 question for Professor
Can you speak
Clark.
up?
Yeah, 2 questions for Professor Wah and 1 question for Professor Clark.
Yeah.
Given the new injection of money to the endowment fund, can we expect that in the next round, the cap for each of these panels will be raised? That's my first question. My second question is that, can you tell us something about the HSSPFS, which hasn't been mentioned so far, in terms of the number of submission or success rate, or whatever information you'd like to share with us? For Professor Clark, on the Humanities and Social Sciences panel, I'm speaking also for other colleagues who do creative work, a piece of science fiction novel, a sculpture, a piece of symphony. Can you share with us how those things are reviewed? Is it more or less the same protocol as the other bit, the first reader, second reader, external, or do you have a different protocol? Thank you.
Okay, so let me try to address the first two questions. I think the caps will be adjusted. However, that still remains to be discussed. So we haven't come to any conclusions yet. Secondly, I think for the HSS PFS, I like to do some advertising here. I think we strongly encourage the community to submit HSS PFS proposals. These are humanities and social sciences prestigious fellowship scheme. We reserve $10 million each year for this scheme, but normally we don't have that many proposals. We cannot use up all the money. Normally it's like 2 or 3 grants funded each year, only using up $3 or $4 million. So we strongly encourage you. There are lots of opportunities for the HSS researchers to submit HSS PFS proposals. So it is in a way that you have to describe what you're doing. It is prestigious. It is different from a normal GRF proposals because it goes up to $1 million. It's not like the normal humanity and social sciences proposals that only go up to $300,000, $400,000. It goes up to $1 million. You can apply for relief time in teaching. We don't have a cap at this point in terms of the number because we cannot use up the money. So as long as your proposal meets the threshold and above the threshold, you will be funded. So therefore, there is no percentage. The success rate, I cannot tell you about the success rate, but for those that meet the criteria, they are all funded. 9 this year, but last year was only 3 or 2. Yeah.
Can I disclose that?
No, I think you just not this year, not yet.
The dangers
but
of
last
an
year
open
was
mic.
low.
Yes, last year was low. This year it's healthier. On creative works, in my 6 or more years on the humanities and arts panel, sub-panel, I've not seen a creative work per se, like a novel or a work of art. But when there are things, say in creative media, they go through exactly the same assessment process as every other proposal. Of course, we choose external reviewers appropriately and carefully to accommodate the difference between mainstream kinds of proposals and these.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. My question concerns about interdisciplinary research. Well, specifically, I'm applying big data and AI research into social science research. So my question maybe goes to Professor Longting and Professor Clark. So how does I submit my proposal to your panel, and what circumstances do you suggest this kind of proposal to be submitted into these 2 panels?
So I can start with that. First of all, one suggestion would be when you have to decide between one of 2 otherwise disparate panels, you may want to go to your core expertise, and that could be your training or, for example, the area that your PhD was in, simply because keeping in mind that you and your history are part of the review process. For example, one of the things that we routinely do is ask, is the person qualified to do the research? So that gets back to your prior training, and therefore you would, in all likelihood, want to stick with your core expertise. Now that said, and again, this is largely my opinion, but a good idea is a good idea, period. And if you can describe that idea and get a potential reviewer engaged and excited, in my opinion, you will be successful regardless of where you apply. So that's one thought to offer.
I think for interdisciplinary panels that cross across different panels, it is we would engage multiple panel chairs to handle the proposal in case they are very rare at this point. Within a panel, it is easier because it will be handled by the same panel chair, and he or she can engage multiple readers to handle the proposal. So we be sure that when you describe the proposal, describe clearly the keywords, the areas that the proposal would fall under by presenting a good abstract in your proposal. Okay, so since we are running out of time, I was told that we should take the final question.
Sorry, I have a question. I'm Wai-Kit Chu from the Chinese University of Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I have a question about the waiting time of the grant application, because the official deadline was in November, and we're supposed to receive the results by the end of June, which is quite a long time compared to other countries. For example, in mainland, the NSFC, they could handle the whole procedure within 5 months. And in Singapore, there are 2 rounds of application per year. So I just try to know, like, if it is possible to make it earlier for us to receive the results.
To move the deadline earlier?
No, I mean, like, just maybe
Soften the processing time.
Like handle
starting the processing time.
All the applications like faster.
Actually, we look at that. In terms of the phase 2 review, we are going to look at the deadline for the submission and the processing of the proposals. The deadline that we have set now was for some reasons. The reason was that we have the proposals due in November. The Secretariat would take 1 month to make sure that everything is right. Then it would be sent to the panel chair. The panel chairs over Christmas would then assign the readers and the reviewers to the proposals. Then the proposals got sent out to the individual reviewers that they would be allowed like a month or 2 months to do the reviewing. But sometimes there are insufficient number of reviews coming back, so they go to a second round. That is why it takes like 4 months for the reviews to be completed in order to collect sufficient number of reports. Then by April, we have a chance for the PIs to make a second declaration in the research. Then after the April deadline, the Secretariat would then prepare for the meeting in June. The June meeting is sometimes like early June or middle of June. So this is how the workflow is done for over the years. Now, we have been talking about shortening the process. It is possible. However, I think that the difficulty with the RGC panel is that they are all done in June in one shot. We have only one meeting each year to discuss the GRF and the ECS. We don't have multiple rounds of call for proposals each year as compared to other countries. So therefore, and furthermore, the reason for holding the meeting in June is that we have to get something like 200 overseas reviewers to come to Hong Kong. And they won't come to Hong Kong in April or in March because it will be in the middle of a term. So June seems to be the only time we can get those people to come to Hong Kong. So there are a lot of constraints and in terms of developing the workflow and the process. But in any case, we are looking at the process in the second phase review of the RGC. And this is something that we will look at to see whether we can do, instead of a physical meeting, whether we can do some virtual meetings over the web electronically, whether there would be multiple rounds of calls for proposals throughout a year. So those are all things on the table today. Okay, so I think that we are running out of time, so I would like to thank everybody for coming to this panel. I think that this is really a great exchange for you to understand how we work, to some of you, maybe it's, the RGC will look like a black box, but in fact, we thought that we are very transparent. So there is a difference in opinion between what you think and what we are doing. But in any case, I hope that this exchange would provide you with some information that we are very open in the process. We try to develop things smoothly with close consultation with the community. And we hope that you would support us in your work. And we look forward to working closely with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, our chairman, Professor Wang, the panel chairman and their representatives, members of the RGC and subject panels, and vice presidents of the universities, and all of you for coming today. See you next year.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good.